All right, Madam Chair, we're ready.
All right. So good afternoon, everybody. We are headed into our afternoon session for Human Services, starting with aging, and then we will have the Department of Social Services after that. I know that there are people still coming back from our break, but Representative Abercrombie, do you have anything?
Just a comment about the independent living centers. You know, I'm really disappointed that they're on the chopping block again, considering the services that they do. I'm going to say to you what I've said to every commissioner. Between the Medicaid deficit, the Medicaid lapses of $450 million, and also us having a surplus, there's no reason that we should be having to do anything to the human services budgets. So I would just like to know the reasoning why you would even think about cutting the independent living centers. And good afternoon, Commissioner.
And before you answer any questions, Commissioner, Senator Kushner, are you on? Do you have any comments before we start up? I know, Senator Kushner, do you have any comments before we start up?
No, I don't, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And I don't see anybody else on right now. Commissioner, thank you very much for coming today. As you know, we're not doing the reading of the testimony this year, which I think has actually worked out pretty good because we've gotten a lot more questioning done. I think that that's helpful to us, because truly what we want to know is questions. So if you wouldn't mind introducing your staff, and I would remind my colleagues, if they have questions, please raise your hand in the chat function so that I can call on you in the order. And go ahead, Commissioner, introduce your staff, and I'll see if I can come up with a couple of questioners for you.
Thank you, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, Senator Minor, Representative France, and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Amy Porter. I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Aging and Disability Services, and I am joined by two of my team members. Michelle Provost is our Fiscal Administrative Manager, and Andrew Norton is our Legislative Liaison. They are both here on screen and available to answer questions as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'll start off with a couple of questions. Can you tell me your personnel count and how many empty or vacant positions you have?
Great, thank you. We have, in our department, we have 447 positions, and 70% of those are federal or other funds. So I'll focus specifically on some of the general fund positions. We have a position count of 137. Of the 137, there are 4 that are slated for a move to the Department of Administrative Services along with the HR centralization. We have 9 that are vacant. We have 10 that are currently inactive, so that leaves us with 114 filled general fund positions.
Thank you. Do you have applications or any sort of marketing to fill the positions that are not filled?
We have our traditional recruitment process that we post. We have a fairly broad network. A lot of our services are sort of specialty services, and we have a broad range of aging and disability partners that we send our recruitments out to.
Thank you for that. And my second question is relative to any of the federal dollars from any of the CARES Act or COVID dollars. Has your administration or your agency received any federal dollars?
We have. We've gotten about 14 million total from the Families First program, from the CARES Act, and from the most recent Consolidated Appropriations Act. A lot of those, as you know, we have We have elderly nutrition as part of our agency and the long-term care ombudsman program as part of our agency. So the bulk of this funding is all for aging services through the administration for community living. And we have a breakout that we can provide to you if that's helpful at the working group meeting.
That would be great if you wouldn't mind bringing that to the working group. We would like that. We would also like to know where your federal positions are and what you use those federal dollars for. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Up next is Representative Abercrombie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioner, and to your staff. So let's follow up on, and I apologize, I didn't realize that the chair wanted just introductions at the beginning. So can you explain the cut for the independent living centers? And then my second question will be, the transfer for the Medicare advocacy is only 270,000, yet there's 300,000 we put in the budget. So just trying to figure out the math there.
Okay, great. So the independent living centers, there are difficult decisions associated with the budget, and we have a number of our programs that have been cut 10% in this budget. Remember that a lot of our budget is federal funds, so there are very few line items on the state funding side, and the independent living centers were one of the programs where there's a 10% cut. The Center for Medicare Advocacy, Michelle, do you have a response to that question, or is that something we need to get for the working group?
It's our understanding that DSS had submitted a 10% reduction for their other expense account, and that included $30,000 from the funds that were earmarked for CMA. So the $300,000 was earmarked to be transferred from DSS to our agency. They submitted for a 10% reduction to those funds. So they are recommending a transfer of the remaining $270,000 to our agency.
So another agency can make a cut to a line item in your agency?
They possess the funds at this time, and that was one of their recommended 10% budget cuts, and it appears as though that recommendation was accepted. And then in the current governor's recommendation, it is recommending to transfer the remaining $270,000 to our agency.
So how does that work? I've never seen that in any of these budgets, that another agency that holds the dollars makes the cut for another agency. Do they call you and say, we're making a 10% cut on your line item? How does that work?
That's how it worked. They made the reduction, reported that as a reduction option, and then that reduction option was recognized during the current budget process, and the remaining funds were of $270,000 is what was earmarked to go forward to our agency instead of the $300,000. It's not something that we've ever encountered before in the past, but
Yeah, no, we haven't. And I've never seen it in another agency either. So it looks like a little bit of switch and bait to me here, but that's a DSS question. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Representative. Up next, Representative Dathan.
Sorry, I'm a little slow at unmuting here. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for your description so far. I actually have a few questions, but I'll start with my two. The first question is, does the agency have any lapses in for 2020? I'm just wondering how COVID has affected, and want to know how this is going to be looking going forward.
Thank you for the question. Michelle, do you want to answer the question on lapses?
Yeah, that's something that we can provide further detail during our working group session. There were several lapses to several of our accounts for fiscal year ending June 30th of 2020. So I can pull together.
Yeah, if you can bring that to the working group, that would be great.
Sure.
My second question, I'm going to talk about Mathematica. and some of the recommendations that they talked about in their report. Can you please talk about, as an agency, what you are doing to address that? And please correct me if I'm speaking out of turn here, but I just want to kind of get an understanding about how we're addressing people in our long-term care facilities based on that report.
Thank you for that question. We are definitely very interested in that work and have tried to be a partner in that. As you know, our long-term care ombudsman program falls within our agency, and they have done incredible work throughout the pandemic to make sure that they are connecting with folks, residents in long-term care facilities and family members. They were active in the nursing home and assisted living oversight working group. I won't say the acronym because I mess it up every time, but we had a couple of folks from our long-term care ombudsman program, and I was actually participating actively in those programs as well when we had the various discussions about, so the Mathematica report, but then really bringing people together, bringing family members and residents and legislators and folks across the board. So I think we're trying to look at those recommendations and see what we can do to move forward. We've been focused on things like the social isolation piece, making sure that residents in our facilities, working on visitation and understanding those rules, working on technology options and making sure that each long-term care facility, residential care home has access to some kind of technology. And we were able to use some of our federal funding to support the facilities as they move forward with trying to make sure people could stay connected during the pandemic. And then folks outside of the long-term care facilities in the community trying to replicate some of those same technology options so that folks could stay connected while they were staying home and staying safe.
So if you could bring to the working group maybe how you're addressing each of the items, that would be really useful. And I'm gonna stop there at my 2 questions, and if there's time, I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative. Representative Abercrombie.
Thank you. Commissioner, where does the ombudsman fall in your budget?
They are in, they show up in the programs for senior citizens line. Is that accurate, Michelle?
There currently are no state funds designated for the long-term care ombudsman program. Their programmatic costs are supported through federal funds, and their positions are supported through general funds, through personal services.
So let me just repeat that just to make sure I heard you accurately. So the ombudsman's position itself, Mairead, is paid for through federal funds, but her employee, oh, okay, go ahead. Sorry, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, all of our positions are general fund positions, including Mairead's position, and all of the programmatic expenses are covered through federal funds.
So give me an example of what a program that she does that's paid federally.
Well, something recent comes to mind. We just did some commercials to encourage people in facilities to take the vaccination. So that was paid for out of federal funds. That's a programmatic cost. They did some other initiatives to get some tablets into the nursing homes so that they could be used for some communication options while they were able to have visitors. That was another programmatic expense. And
Wasn't that, let me just interrupt you there. All of those tablets I thought were paid for under CARES Act money.
correct, federal funding, yes.
Okay.
Their
They-
traditional federal dollars can be used for things like, you know, every nursing facility, we strive to have a resident council, and then we have an e-board of residents councils where all of the presidents come together and share best practices, share information. There's a Voices Forum every year, so the federal funds are able to support the Voices Forum that brings residents and family members, legislators, policymakers together to make sure that the voices of residents are heard in that process. So there's a lot of focus on the residents and the family members.
So could you, for the work group, just bring her budget? I'd like to see how the dollars are being spent. I agree with you. The residents forum that you have at AquaTurf every year is phenomenal. It's great to be able to, you know, talk to the residents. So I think that's money well spent, but I'd be really curious because there's some things going on under the Ombudsman when it comes to volunteers, where we used to have 200 throughout the state who helped out with residents in nursing homes, and that program is down to 63. So I'd just like to follow the dollars and figure out where we can best spend our dollars. So that would be really helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Representative Abercrombie. Senator Kushner, you had your hand up. Do you have a question? I know you took it down again, but I don't know if you had a question.
I'll go ahead and ask it. I just wanted to follow up on Representative Dathan's question about the mathematical report and the recommendations. And when you answered, it wasn't clear to me whether you were going to specifically address the social isolation and technology issues recommended in there, or was it the totality of the report that touches your agency that you would respond to?
We can certainly come back to the working group with specifically how we're going to address the recommendations. You know, a lot of that is a collective effort across agencies, and we have been doing a lot of cross-agency work to make sure that we could understand the recommendations and respond to them. And a lot of them are already underway. So we can talk specifically to what Aging and Disability Services is doing in relation to those recommendations, but we are doing it in partnership with other agencies as well.
That would be helpful, primarily because one of our charges is to make sure that those recommendations and best practices are put into statute, or at least reflected in the budget for the coming year. So that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner. Up next is Representative Dathan.
Thank you for a second chance here. My next question has to do with the Workers' Compensation Fund. Can you explain to me why this is still remaining in the Aging and Disability Services when most of our other agencies are consolidating that into DAS?
Are you referencing the personal services and other expenses, rehab services from the Workers' Compensation Fund? The 1 point.
Yeah, so we have the, it's about 2.0 in each year, and 6 people.
Right.
And maybe I just don't understand the structure. And if you could explain that, that would be great.
Sure, thank you for that question. So the Workers' Rehabilitation Program within our agency is specifically for individuals who have been injured on the job and want to access rehabilitation services to go back to work. So we get referrals from the Workers' Comp Commission. We have a team of individuals that work with those individuals and the Workers' Comp Commission employees to help that person connect to employment. So that's what this piece is for. It's not the workers' comp for our staff. It is people across Connecticut who are injured on the job who have, it's a voluntary program to be able to get rehabilitation services.
Got it. It's not a for your agency. It's for people who are in the community. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you for explaining that. The next question I had was regarding the consolidation of human resources, and we've put those into DAS as you addressed. I just wanted to ask your agency how that's working out, and are you able to? I know you said 10 inactive positions that it sounds like you're trying to address, but thinking ahead of retirements and things like that, I'm just concerned about how that departmental move to DAS has affected your agency.
Thank you for that question. For us, it has been, we're a small agency or a medium-sized agency, I guess. So there are a lot of things where our staff were having to cover a lot of different areas and really be generalists. So this allows us to access some folks who really can specialize in certain areas like family medical leave, like retirements, and we're at workers' compensation, your last question. So it does allow us to tap into some expertise there. And our human resource business partners are still sitting here within our agency. And so we have great access to them. We have had DAS check in with us a couple times to see, what can we improve? How can we make this work a little bit better? We it's a brand new process, so we always have suggestions, but overall it's been meeting the needs of our agency. We've been able to do our recruitments. We have a lot of federal funds, so we are able to hire in groups of individuals, and our HR has been responsive to that.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that explanation. And I look forward to addressing all the mathematics stuff that also Senator Kushner followed up with. So I think that is it. Thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions for the Commissioner? Are there any further questions for the Commissioner? Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is an area that is new to me. I haven't been on this committee, any of the committees involved with your work, and served on this subcommittee in the past. And so and I'm not sure I'm asking the right person about this, but one of my colleagues did raise with me some of the concerns about a lack of resources for other expenses for the elderly, and not the other kinds of personal expenses that folks receive, and that I don't know if that falls within your agency, if you know what I'm talking about, but that has been cut back in the past. And as costs go up, it's very limiting to individuals to rely on those funds. Am I in the right place?
I just so I think that's in the nursing home, Commissioner, the personal services line item that residents are allowed to work off of. That's something that came out of the Aging Committee, talking about the personal services. So that's what Senator Kushner is. I believe that's the issue that she's talking about. So.
Yeah, thank you for the question. That does not fall in our agency. That's a funding issue. So I think that's a Department of Social Services question.
Thank you for that clarification.
Which, by the way, just so you know, Senator, none of us know everything that every agency does. So we all ask the same questions. So don't, it's always better to ask the question. Are there any other further questions for the Commissioner? Seeing none. Commissioner, thank you very much for coming today. We finished right a little bit early, not too early. And we look forward to you coming to the working group with some issues or anything that you need to bring to us, bring in detail. We'll be looking at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam Administrator. Oh. Representative Abercrombie, do you have a question?
No, I was just saying bye to Amy. Sorry.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
The Commissioner and the majority of her team are in the waiting room, but not the entirety of her team.
Oh, you mean the whole 14 to 20 of them that they need to bring with them every time they go someplace?
So that being said,
I'll tell you what, we limited them to 5 on human services because it was ridiculous. So if you can't do it with 5, then you shouldn't be in that area.
So Madam Administrator, you can start letting them in.
Okay.
Because I think there's going to be questions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It'll take us a minute or two to rename folks anyway.
Correct.
Kathy, you can tell it's been like one of those weeks.
I could tell.
Good afternoon, Senator.
I muted myself when I went to talk instead of keeping me unmuted. I apologize. So Commissioner, if you wouldn't mind, as you know, we're not doing a reading of testimony, and I already have about 15 people that have questions. So if you could just introduce your team that's here so that we could start the questions, that would be great.
Happy to. Good afternoon, Senator Austin and the members of the committee. Very happy to be here with you this afternoon. I do have a number of the team from DSS joining. I have Deputy Commissioners Brennan and Gilbert. With me our Chief Fiscal Officer, Nick Benedetto, Director of Health Services, Kate McAvoy, and from her team, Don Lambert from Community Options and Nina Holmes from Medical Policy. Also have our Director of Program Oversight, Peter Hadler, and Kristen Dowdy from his team, Dan Giacomi from our SNAP program, Cassie Norfleet Johnson from Community Services, and our Director of Field Operations, Marva Parent.
Okay, great. Thank you. As you know, we're not reading testimony today. We're just asking questions. So I'm going to start off with one question relative to food stamps. And I tried to get this answer. And when we called, my aide called DSS, they said it was an SDE issue. When we called SDE, they said it was a DSS issue. So I don't know whose issue it is, but we were meeting regularly during the pandemic. And I was trying to find out when we were going to provide EBT cards for those families who did not qualify for food stamps, but were getting free and reduced lunch. And there was a part that went out that said to the schools that said, let us know who was getting it. But what were the parameters revolving around that? Do you have that? If you could, I actually don't need to talk about it now. I just want to know if you have it. Or SDE has it. I just want to know what those rules are governing that program for those people who get food stamps that are not regularly getting food stamps.
Yes, absolutely, Senator. And I apologize you encountered the challenge in getting the information. You're referring to the Pandemic Ebt Program, which allowed all residents in cities and towns with a certain percentage of children receiving free and reduced lunch to get a SNAP benefit. So we will certainly get you the parameters around that. And we can also share with you the amount that has been distributed a couple of times now through Pandemic Ebt. We'll have the info with you.
That would be great. Just bring it to the working group. That would be wonderful.
Sure thing.
And then I would also like brought to the working group COVID dollars, any dollars that you got from any federal program, Families First, CARES Act, anything that if we're potentially expecting COVID dollars, if you wouldn't mind bringing those broken out by the programs that they handled. And if you paid out to other agencies dollars, I would like that too.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my two questions. Next up is Representative Abercrombie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner, and to your staff. Can you, I guess I'm going to start with the elephant in the room, which is the MSP program. Can you explain to me how you feel that you can roll out an acid test for those individuals? And first, can you start, because we do have new members on appropriations who are not on human services, so I don't want to assume all my colleagues understand. Can you explain what MSP is and kind of talk just real quickly about it being the former CONPACE program? And then also how you think that we can roll out an acid test, what that entails. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Happy to do that. So the Medicare Savings Program is a program that allows certain low-income individuals who are on Medicare to also receive support from the Medicaid program to offset some of their out-of-pocket costs. So Medicare, although it's virtually universal for people over the age of 65, does have some out-of-pocket costs, both in the form of premiums for Part B, which is the outpatient part of Medicare, and certain copays as well. So the Medicare Savings Program allows Medicaid to pay for some of those costs for low-income seniors. In order to qualify as a senior for the Medicare Savings Program, there are two potential ways that states can look at the individual's income and assets. They can look at income and they can look at assets. And states can choose to have an asset test or not have an asset test. And states can also look at varying levels of income to allow individuals to qualify. So in Connecticut, our income levels are the highest in the country. In other words, individuals in Connecticut can qualify for this program with higher incomes than any other state. In addition, Connecticut is currently only one of 9 states that do not have an asset test for the Medicare Savings Program. There are 38 other states that have an asset test, which is equal to the federal minimum asset. So that is $7,800 for singles and $11,800 for couples. So if you have assets that exceed those minimums in those 38 states, you don't qualify for the program. There are 3 states with limits that are higher than the federal minimum, those being Maine, Massachusetts, and Minnesota. What we are proposing is that effective August 1st, 2022, Connecticut would align with the majority of other states by instituting an asset test, but instead of setting it equal to the federal minimum, as was proposed 2 years ago, it would align with the Massachusetts asset test level, which is currently $15,700 for individuals and $23,600 for couples. The income eligibility, and I think this is important to state, the income eligibility for this program would remain unchanged and would remain the highest in the country.
So let's drill down a little bit for that. In the budget, currently DSS does not have a program to evaluate assets for this test, correct?
We do, Representative, have recently instituted an asset verification system for other programs that we administer at DSS. So we would be able to deploy that asset verification system for this program.
So then why are in the budget, are you asking for 1.1 million for 22 and 3.6 million for 23 for the computer system?
For the systems. Peter, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak briefly to that. Good afternoon. I'm Peter Hadler. I'm the Director of Program Oversight and Grant Administration here at DSS. We are envisioning a process where we would roll this out next year. There are some distinct system costs to developing the process that we're proposing, in part because it is a volume of enrollees that would be subject to an asset test that is larger than we currently review for other programs. We have some requests out to CMS to get some guidance on the ways that we might be able to implement it. But based on our prior experience when we looked at income changes, there was the suggestion that we would have to do an evaluation of everyone's eligibility simultaneously. Given the scope of the number of people who we'd have to review at one time, at least initially, we anticipate that we would have to ramp up both system and staff costs to support that full evaluation in order to do it all at once. If we are able to spread it out over a little bit of a longer amount of time, there may be some reduced costs there. I'd also just note that Deputy Commissioner Mike Gilbert, if he's got anything that he wants to help clarify on that, he's also pretty close to the costs on this question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Mike Gilbert, Deputy Commissioner of Finance Administration. Just to add a little bit to Peter's information around this one, as the Commissioner mentioned, we do have an asset verification system, but there is a need to make some changes in our impact system to be able to accommodate the linkage of the asset verification functionality to the MSP program in particular. It is not yet, the AVS is not yet linked to the Medicare Savings Program eligibility determinations. So we need to make that connection. So that's the reason for a significant portion of the first year administrative expenses. I would also mention that, the support for this effort, as Peter mentioned, it's a very concentrated effort given the CMS prior guidance. We believe it'll be a very concentrated effort, and we will need to have focused supports during a very short time frame in order to transact reviews of all of the individuals involved. So a good portion of that money also supports some vendor or contractor supports to assist in that process. It's not all for systems changes.
And how many of those employees are going to be dispersed to help the elderly work through this system? Because obviously you're going to send a letter to the elderly or disabled, because we know there are a lot of young people that are getting this service, MSP, right? They're disabled. You're going to send a letter and you're now going to say that we're changing the system. And what are you going to require them to show for their assets? And who's going to be the boots on the ground to help these elderly people navigate this system? Because my understanding is if they do not submit this information, then they are going to be kicked out of the system, which means that our elderly that need blood work, pharmacy, preventative care will no longer get that. People with disabilities who rely on this for their prescriptions, especially someone that, and I'll give you an example. I have a young woman that's 34 years old, has multiple disabilities. She's going blind. She needed a special pharmacy drug to be able to prolong her vision. She was able to get it because she's on MSP. This prescription is thousands of dollars. There is no way this young woman would be able to afford it without it. So who's going to be the boots to the ground that are going to help these individuals navigate this system?
So I'm going to interrupt for 1 second, Representative Abercrombie. I'm just going to tell you, Commissioner, we passed this before. Many of us were here when we passed this before. We got hundreds of thousands of calls to legislators on how dramatically this impacted people. We came back into session in a special session to reverse this. I know it was prior to this administration, but it was only 2017 in the bipartisan budget. There is absolutely no way that this change to MSP is making it through the budget. Let me just be really clear about that. You can bring us all of the information that Representative Abercrombie is asking for. I think that that's wise. There is absolutely, let me say that again, absolutely no way that we're incorporating changes to MSP. We got hundreds of thousands of calls, and unless the Department of Social Services is willing to take all of our constituent phone calls that we got, that people were desperate and in tears, the minority leader, Senator Fasano, requested a special session because it was a Republican plank in the of their budget that went through. All of us are shocked that this would ever be in anybody's budget. So 3 years ago, this happened. 3 years ago, we came back in special session and found the $160 million. Absolutely no way that are we going to pass that this year in the middle of a pandemic when people need things. So I think from MSP, I just want you to hear that very clearly. Absolutely no way is this going to be incorporated in any budget that we have. You can certainly bring things that you want to try and encourage us to. I'm an absolute no, absolutely no. Representative Abercrombie, do you have another question? Relative to anything besides MSP?
I just thank you so much for saying that publicly for all of us. it just warms my heart that we're all on the same page with that. I will get back in line and let my colleagues ask questions. But yes, I'll ask questions after.
Thank you very much, Representative. Up next is Representative Datham, followed by Representative Walker.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for saying that about the Medicare asset test. It's been on my mind. I wasn't able to speak to the Commissioner yesterday in Human Services about my objection to it. It is a tax on elderly and disabled in our state, and I don't think this is the right time. So thank you, Madam Chair. So for my questions for today, I've kind of lost my train of thought, but I wanted to get an overall understanding about, as an agency, with the programs that you work with, is there a possibility that we can get like a census by program line item for 3 years of all the people that you serve within DSS? And so that we'd be able to tie that back into our budget line items? Really a description of the programs, maybe a breakout of how much is paid by the feds and what is paid for by the state, and sort of the average length of service if it's a shorter term program. That would be really useful, and just bringing that to the work group would be good. My next question had to do with the residential home care services. Can you please explain how this is working, and is it just a change in allocation, or are we making some cuts to the program?
No, we're actually the opposite. We're making some investments in the program. And first of all, with respect to your first question, we'd be happy to do that. In the slide presentation that we sent over in preparation for this hearing, I think you'll find a representative of the majority of the information in terms of program enrollment and duration of enrollment, et cetera, but we'd be happy to elaborate on any of that for the working group. With respect to the RCH changes, this is, I'm fond of saying that the Medicaid program is nothing if it's not complicated. This falls squarely in that category, so it can be a little bit challenging to explain. So I'll do my best, and please feel free to ask further questions. The bottom line is that right now we are providing services to individuals who reside in residential care homes that could receive federal reimbursement, but for which we are not currently getting federal match. So this is a way to bring tens of millions of dollars into the state of Connecticut without cutting services to these individuals. In order to do that, we need to make sure that these RCHs, these residential care homes, can qualify as what's called a home and community-based setting according to federal regulations. And there is an extremely elaborate document and set of regulations, which are called settings requirements, that every state needs to comply with in order to receive federal match as a home and community-based service. So the changes that we're making to the RCH program have to do with some of the tenancy requirements. And if we comply with those tenancy requirements, we will be able to receive federal match for the first time for services being received currently by individuals in these homes, but being paid for through state-only dollars. We will then reinvest a portion of that new federal money into the RCH program as a result.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify, I did see what was in your presentation, but I was hoping to see a little bit more granular census, if you will, so that I can really get an understanding budget line item by budget line item, the numbers of people we serve rather than just necessarily in the aggregate. Your presentation was great as usual. You guys are very well prepared, and I appreciate the work that you did in advance for that. So thank you, Madam Commissioner, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure, we'll get you those numbers.
Thank you very much, Representative. Representative Walker, followed by Representative Nolan.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Commissioner. It's good to see you and all your staff. I'm hi to all of DSS people. I'm really excited to see you here. Before I get into the things I'd like for the working group, I want to kind of follow up with what Representative Dathan was talking about under the Connecticut home care program. You said that there were some federal tenancy. Is that tenant requirements? Is that what that is? Okay. That are in the program. Can you tell us what are those requirements that we have to comply with in order to be able to pull down Medicaid dollars?
Yep, and this is, I'm mixing apples and oranges a little bit here, but this is under separate legislation that was heard by the Public Health Committee, actually, which would change the requirements for people who are being involuntarily discharged. And it would give them additional rights at the time of involuntary discharge, but more to align with regular landlord-tenant rights. Rather than more aligned with a medical discharge. And that's one of the requirements of qualifying as a home and community-based service. Mm-hmm. And so we need that portion to sort of complete this package and qualify these RCHs as home and community-based settings so that we can get the additional reimbursement.
Could you send that to the working group? Because if I ask you, I'm sure they're lengthy, but I think it's interesting. We need to see what are we changing in the program beyond just moving them in the line. There's requirements that I think we need to understand. And let me ask my other question, and then I'll go to the others. On your reducing funding for various line items, you have a reduction to human resource development Hispanic program of 240. And then you also have human resource development Hispanic program, again, the 504 that was taken out because of Hurricane Maria. How much does that leave in the Hispanic human resource line item?
Mike, can you take that one?
Hello, Mike Gilbert.
Yeah. So basically, what we're
sorry,
doing.
Representative.
That's okay. What we're doing is we're cutting that line item in half.
That is, yes, very close to half. The reduction, the former level for the account is approximately 1.5 million, and it's going down to 800,000. That is correct.
What does that line item do? What does it pay for?
Are you referring to, Representative, the
Human Resource Development Hispanic programs?
That was a program that was developed in response to Hurricane Maria.
I understand that, but that line item, what other things do we pay for in that line item?
Well, I think that's the point, is that with the remoteness of the hurricane, it was designed to assist disaster victims with that fund. And so since we're distant from that event, the spending has declined.
Okay, but let me ask a question. What services does that pay for? Besides Hurricane Maria, what services does that line item pay for?
I believe it's primarily case management services, but Kathy, you know more detail, or should we bring that back?
You're muted. Yeah.
Thank you. I apologize. Good
Okay.
afternoon, Kathy Brennan, Deputy Commissioner at DSS. Commissioner, you're right. It's case management services in specific in certain areas to individuals of Hispanic descent. Case management services can range from, actually, it's very similar services to what our community action agencies provide, but just in different catchment areas.
And okay.
I'll be happy to get you some more information on that, Representative Walker.
I would like more information, but
sure.
That, and then you have a reduction of 200 in the community action. What is it? The community community services line item, which is community action agency, correct?
I'm going to ask Mike to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's more than community action. I think community services is a broader category.
Okay. I'm highlighting these because of the fact that these are both of these agencies or these lines are investments in minority communities. Both of these lines, one works with Latino and one works with majority Black. And in the light of the pandemic, where we already have seen some problems that need to be addressed, especially case management, I just wonder, was there a thought that these services were not necessary? Was there a thought that these communities are doing well after the pandemic? I'm really curious how we found those line items to be acceptable. I guess it also goes along with the MSP, but this one is even more because there's another community service reduction for annualizing of 500,000. And the amount that, I mean, it was not even that much in the line. It's 1.8 million, and you drop it down to just about a little over $1 million. I find that one really not well thought as far as trying to reach to the people that obviously have been hit so hard. So that one really, those reductions really bother me also. And my next question, and my second question is on the Microsoft 365 software license. It says that you transferred 1.7 million, you're transferring 1.7 million in 22 and 23 to DAS for the purchase and management of software licenses. And then you're also, am I wrong in this? You're transferring another 513 on top of that. Is that correct?
So I'll let Mike or Nick speak to that. That this is part of the HR centralization representative. So some of those functions that had previously been, as you know, dispersed across agencies are being consolidated within DSS. Excuse me, DAS. Nick or Mike, do you want to speak to the specific amounts?
Sure, and there may be, sorry, Mike Gilbert.
Yeah.
There may be two items here, Representative. The Mike, I thought they stood alone. There is a transfer to recognize the HR consolidation, which is in the range of $1.5 million. Positions going to DAS where they're being centralized or consolidated, and also to the Office of Labor Relations at OPM. In addition to that, there is a transfer of funds. Actually, I believe this happened 2 years ago where DAS Best centralized the purchase of Microsoft licenses to achieve some efficiencies in terms of purchasing, purchase power. They are purchasing them on behalf of all agencies. And so all agencies were asked to contribute their existing spend towards that consolidated purchase. And so that represents our share.
Okay, so, but okay, so maybe the background, it says that you're transferring 1.7 in 22 and 23 to DAS. And then the governor in his write-up, it says transferring 513 to DAS. Is that on top of the 1.7 or is that incorporated into the 1.7? Do you, Mike, do you understand my question?
Definitely understand your question. I was just trying to find the OFA write-up so I could refer to the 1.7 million. I apologize. I didn't have that context in my head. We can bring that back to the subcommittee and clarify if that's acceptable.
What we would like to know is how much money are you transferring to DAS for the software and for IT services? I guess this is going to be combined, so that would be helpful. And if we could get to the committee, I'd like to know all your unfilled staffing positions that you have in your agency. I'd like to know the lapses, your holdbacks, your carry forwards, and then I'd like your OE breakdown on what your OE expenses are in that line item. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Walker. Representative Nolan took his hand down, Commissioner, but he is going to be sending you a letter vis-a-vis relative to health districts and health district funding, which is not really out of DSS. So we're going to hold off on that.
Okay.
The next up is Representative Dillon, followed by Senator Kushner, followed by Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Representative.
I just have a couple of questions I'd like to kick off for further information to be provided to the work group. And some I've mentioned in other venues, but I want to echo the concern about the cut in the Hispanic services so that could be disaggregated so we'll understand who's going to be affected. What basis went into the assumptions that there would be a 5% drop in C-sections for a cut in that line item? Why are the dollars to the Jewish Federation totally wiped out? It's a tiny amount, and for all I know, they turned it down, but it seemed odd. And so radiologist rates, C-sections. I asked the Secretary of OPM in her budget presentation for information year over year on utilization of bone and hip replacements because so many elective procedures had been deferred, but elective doesn't mean unnecessary. People weren't leaving their homes. And so I was wondering if there was unmet need that we should be anticipating. I haven't gotten that. Maybe it went to the committee and it was lost, or maybe they just forgot, but I am interested in that as well. And so that's a couple of things.
So if I may, could I clarify your ask on that latter? So we did provide some information in general, categories about change in service volume during the current fiscal year compared to the prior. But were you looking for specific categories of service change between fiscal 20 and fiscal 21? And what were those categories?
It was really like a hip replacement or a knee replacement, that particular category.
Okay.
It's needed, but not urgent care if you're staying at home. And I was trying to think of categories where we may anticipate pent-up demand since those procedures were deferred during the pandemic.
Okay.
So it would be year over year utilization. And I did want to echo the concerns. I was happy to hear the Senate chair on Medicare Savings. Many women do not have access to their husband's pensions if they're divorced. If they worked all their lives, they may have a pathetic or minimal, or if they stayed home, they don't have pension. They're living on their savings, which in a low interest rate environment means they're having a really tough time. And I voted for that budget in 2017, and I met all those people at our local library. And so they were quite distressed. And given that other categories of wealth are untouched in this budget, I think it makes it hard to defend on the basis of fairness, especially for women. Although, of course, I care about men too.
Understood. But just to be clear that we are not proposing changing the income levels. It would just be the asset test.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair. I'm done.
Thank you very much, Representative Dillon. Next up is Senator Kushner, followed by Representative Johnson. And remember, if you have detailed questions, you can ask for information to be brought to the working group so that you can actually delve into the numbers there. So Senator Kushner, you're up.
Thank you. And I was not in the legislature when that budget was passed that implemented the asset test, but I too heard about it when I was running for office. In so many households that I spoke with, people were so deeply hurt by that and anxious about whether it would happen again, even though it was reinstated. And so I was happy to hear Senator Austin comment on that. My questions, I have several, but I will just start with two. We had a hearing yesterday in the Labor Committee, and we heard from so many PCAs about the problems with the Allied contract. And we also heard that that contract is being renegotiated, that it expires in June. And I wondered where that, I would like more detail on that contract, how much for that, where it's found in the budget, whether or not they lived up to the contract that we had with them, and whether we intend to, if we are renewing, what are the absolute protections that this problem won't persist. And to say we were there for 12 hours yesterday, and I would say about at least a quarter, if not 30% of the people testifying were people who had problems getting paid, and not just PCAs, but also there were a number of consumers who talked about their problems with Allied. And so that's, I think, a critical area for more discussion. My second, and I have several, so I'll come back when we go a second time around. I just, on the MSP, you do talk about the amount of savings that would be there from the asset test, but can you translate that into the number of people that you project would be impacted? I think that would be helpful to know as well. And I think that's my two questions, so I'll wait until I get a second turn. Thank you.
Yes, we do have the number. Let me just see if I can find it in my notes here. Projected individuals that would be impacted by the asset test. We estimate, because we don't have current asset information on individuals in the Medicare Savings Program. So we looked at other states that the majority of other states that have an asset test and tried to project what that might look like for us. Peter has the numbers. I can't find it in my notes. I believe.
Yeah, it's 21,200, Commissioner.
Say again?
21,200 is our estimate.
Out of the total of?
Of approximately 189,000.
189,000, 21,000 individuals would potentially be impacted is our estimate.
Thank you for that information. And thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll reserve my questions for the second time around.
Thank you very much. Representative Johnson, followed by Representative Abercrombie.
3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony. My question has to do with, first of all, the Natchog Hospital reductions. I'm very interested in what's going on there, and this is one of the few places where we have a place for young people with behavioral health difficulties. So I would like to see us maintain the access and the reimbursement rates. As you know, Eastern Connecticut tends to have less in terms of the reimbursement rates. So I would like to make sure that we are able to continue the services here. So you would bring that to the work group. Also,
I beg your pardon, which hospital were you talking about?
Natchog Hospital, the psychiatric hospital that's affiliated with Hartford Health.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. And then the other one is the dually eligible beneficiaries, people who are on Medicare and Medicaid who need durable medical equipment. If you could just bring to the work group that how you operate in that circumstance has been a problem of a like catch-22 problem for years, and I just want to make sure that cuts to that program don't actually put us back in the catch-22 situation that will cause us to be going through hearing procedures. They'll keep people in durable medical equipment that may not be appropriate for them anymore. So those are my two questions, and thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Kathy.
Given that I've
Do you
got,
have, I'm here. It takes me a while to unmute. So, thank you, Representative Johnson, Representative Abercrombie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the second time. Two quick questions. In your write-up on page 28 of the presentation you sent us, you transfer $300,000 to Aging and Disabilities for the Medicare Center for Medicaid, Medicare and Advocacy. You also, in your write-up here, have a $300,000 transfer, yet in the Aging and Disabilities budget, it's only $270,000.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. We did anticipate that transfer of $300,000. That was an OPM recommendation in transit between the two agencies. The amount was reduced from 300 to 270.
So OPM made a decision to just cut it.
That was their recommendation, yes, Representative.
Okay. And in your write-up, when you're removing the COLAs for old age assistance, aid to the blind, aid to the disabled, you have a cut in the budget of $770,500 in 22 and 2.1 million in 23. What's the lapse on that line item?
Mike, I'm going to ask you to respond, if you would, please, on those two.
I'm sure Mike's
Sure.
ready.
I'm ready today. Thank you, Representative. In those particular areas for SFY 2021, we are currently looking at a lapse of 13.4 million in the Temporary Family Assistance Program. We are looking at a lapse of approximately 3.7 million in the Old Age Assistance Program. We are looking at a lapse of approximately 7.7 million in the Aid to the Disabled Program. And we are also looking at a lapse of approximately 2 million in the state administered, the SAGA program, state administered general assistance.
So even if we gave them their COLAs, there'd be plenty of money through the lapse for the agency and OPM to recover. You don't have to respond to that, Commissioner. My other question is, I'm very concerned about the, I like the bundle rate for OBGYNs. My question is, if we're reducing it because of C-sections and we have a plan to reduce C-sections, I'm surprised that we're not willing to give parity to midwives who keeps us at a lower rate. You know, you've got a reduction of 830,000 here. My understanding is it would only cost half of that to do parity for midwives. So can you kind of explain why we're not, if we're asking people to do this work, which is good in my opinion, and you're the doc here, you know, why we would not invest in something like that? And are you aware of how many midwife operations we've lost in the state over the last 2 years?
It's a fair point. There were a number of issues that came up in the last session around obstetrics and birth outcomes that DSS is very interested in working with you all on. One of them was this issue of parity in payment for nurse midwives vis-a-vis obstetrician gynecologists. There was the issue around doulas, and then of course issues around health equity and the disparities that we see in birth outcomes for women of color compared to white women. And DSS is very interested, of course, in working with you and with our partners in the community and with our clients on addressing all of those things. We have high rates of neonatal abstinence syndrome in Connecticut. We have extremely high rates of cesarean delivery. And as I mentioned, we have disparities in our birth outcomes, and we need to tackle all of those things. But one of the ways we can do that at DSS most effectively is to make sure that our payment system is aligned with those objectives. And the payment system we have now does have some rewards in it for particular quality measures. But we would like to really develop and have begun, since we last met on this, to develop in partnership with stakeholders and with a community, a more comprehensive way to address all of those issues and drive improvements with our payment bundle. So to your specific question, Representative, that was my editorialization because it's a topic that we're very interested in at DSS. But to your specific question, we intend to look at the issue of parity as part of this, and we will have nurse midwives at the table as we develop this bundle. So I would anticipate, and we welcome your input as the process proceeds, but I would anticipate that issue will be addressed as the bundle is developed.
So as you proceed with that, I would actually, and I'm going to volunteer her, my colleague Jillian Gilchrist would be the person that you would want at the table. This is something that she's been working on under MAPOC subcommittee. She's much more versed on it than I am because she's been working directly with the midwives on this issue. So she would be the person, and I think she was on here. She would be the person that would be best to be at the table with you. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Funds we would receive.
Thank you very much. Senator Kushner.
Thank you for the second time. I do have a question. I'm just going back to try and find it in my notes. You projected a cut in the diaper bank, and I wondered if you could tell us what that reduced funding will mean in terms of the number of people that will not be able to be served. We have gotten a number of constituents, I know I have, I'm sure others have, really concerned about that cut in the diaper bank, and what's the thinking behind why we would be doing this now, because it affects so many low-income people particularly struggling after the pandemic or during the pandemic. That's my first question.
Yes, and in terms of an estimate of the number of clients served that would be impacted by that, I don't know that we have that in our estimate, but we could certainly get that for you. Peter, do you have a numerical estimate, or is that something we should bring back?
I can get back. I'm going to say it's approximately 2,000 families were served with the funding in this most recent fiscal year. And that was including, I think, funding at the same level that has been proposed for the upcoming one, but I can get you some more specific data for next week.
Thank you. And my second question, and this, I asked this in the wrong place just before you guys came on, and it's not an area that I'm super familiar with, but it has to do with the personal expenses, the other expenses that I'm told these are folks in nursing homes that they are allotted, and there was a reduction in that as well. And I know that I've heard from folks that this is really difficult because as things get more costly, it's really hard for folks to have any kind of resources to pay for the kind of personal needs they have. So could you, and I'm not sure where that is, I saw it in here, but if you could tell me where it is so I could focus on it and what's the thinking behind that as well.
Yeah. Where is the information on the personal needs allowance changes? Can anybody point to that for Senator Kushner?
Commissioner, this is Mike Gilbert. I don't believe that there was any adjustment to the personal needs allowance in the budget, but be happy to follow up if there's anything specific that you see that needs further review.
Can you just tell me what that would be in the budget line so that I can look at it and understand a little better? Because I know that it's been an area of concern. And maybe it's not been reduced, maybe it's just that it's not been increased and that it was reduced. Right.
The personal needs allowance specifically is something that is, I want to say, captured in our overall Medicaid funding amount. So if there were any changes in the personal needs allowance, there would have been an adjustment in the Medicaid funding to recognize that. And there were no adjustments this year. So as with many things in Medicaid, there are a number of different program and funding aspects captured in a very large number. I think we would be happy to bring additional detail. I don't know if specifically, and Kate, if you could correct me if I have this wrong, but I believe the personal needs allowance is currently at $60 per individual per month.
That's correct. This is Kate McAvoy, Director of Health Services. So it is set at $60 per month. And to the best of my understanding, just reinforcing what Deputy Commissioner Gilbert just said, there is no proposed change within the governor's budget. I do separately understand that there are bills that are proposing action on the personal needs allowance, but again, we did not see anything in the budget, and you would not see that broken out unless there had been a proposal, because of the many types of Medicaid expenditures are captured in that line.
Thank you. That's helpful, because I think that is precisely what I had been hearing about, but I will also seek more information before we meet you next. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Kushner. Representative Dathan, followed by Representative Wilson. And remember, if you have detailed questions, you can ask them to bring the detail to the working group. Thank you.
I fully agree. I'm happy for them to bring it to the working group. Just had a question, really. Two questions. The first question is regarding the line item of it says disproportionate share. Do you please explain what that line item is? I think you're on mute, Commissioner. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yes, and can you just say, Representative, the amount of
Sure.
share dollars that you're looking at?
Yeah, it's 108 million, almost 109 million, and it says DMS disproportionate share. I wasn't sure what that related to.
Yeah, Mike.
Did you hear me? It's 109 million, and I didn't understand what it related to.
Thank you, Mike Gilbert. Representative, this is a long-standing budget item that goes back many years, in which we are funded for a portion of the expenses of the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services facilities. This funding is transferred directly back to them to facilitate a federal claim for reimbursement against the disproportionate share program. There's a lot more to it in terms of the requirements, to make sure that the claims meet the DISH standards, and we work with DMIS to facilitate reporting of appropriate data and to ensure that we're following federal guidelines. But it's basically a transfer to help facilitate additional federal claims related to disproportionate share.
Got it. Thank you so much for explaining that. The next is, and I'm sorry if you did talk about this, and if you did, please forgive me, and we can talk about it more in the working group. But I got on another call very quickly. I want to understand, it says to remove the statutory rate increases. Could you explain what is going on and why we are changing the statutory rate increases?
We can either do that now, or we can do that
in the work group. Is absolutely fine. Thank you so much, Commissioner. I know my colleagues still have questions, and your time is so valuable within everything you're doing. So thank you for all your efforts for our state. I know
we're happy to explain those.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You take care.
When we ask folks,
you're all set, Representative?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to go back for a moment to the personal needs allowance. There is a proposed bill, Senate Bill 418, through the Aging Committee to increase that to $72.75. Of course, don't know what the disposition of that's going to be, but it is on the table again. So I just wanted to make sure everyone on this committee was aware of that. Thank you.
Representative Wilson, are you all set? Representative Abercrombie for the third time.
Just for clarification, Commissioner, can you explain to my colleagues how the need allowance works for the individuals, how their money is spent down to get into the nursing home, they become Medicaid, and how they're able to keep this money? Can you explain that pocket? I think it might be helpful for some of the new members on this committee.
Yeah, I could make an attempt, but the far better qualified individual to do that is Kate. So I'm going to ask her if she would do what you asked.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you for the slides again.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone. Again, Keith McAvoy, Director of Health Services. So as Representative Abercrombie notes, it is a frequent scenario that an individual will privately spend their resources on nursing home care, spending down to Medicaid eligibility, which broadly speaking, an individual may have only $1,600 in assets other than certain assets that are identified as exempt in the eligibility process. There is also essentially an eligibility criteria which requires an individual to spend the bulk of his or her income towards their nursing home care. The individual is, however, permitted to retain what is called the personal needs allowance, and that is the $60 to which we have been referring. And there is a statutory minimum that is set by that federally, but states do have the option to increase from that minimum. So there's been variable levels of personal need allowance specified in Connecticut law over the years, but as we've said, $60 is the current level that is set.
And what's the federal minimum?
You know, I am so sorry to say I am not going to feel confident about saying that out loud. I'm not sure if Peter Hadley might know that offhand.
I wish I had it at my fingertips, Kate, but I don't. Maybe we can get that to you for next week.
Yeah, I beg your pardon. We should know that.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, everybody. Are there any other questions? Representative Datham for the third time, I think. I can't.
Sorry, my dog. Just give me 1 second. Apologies. I wanted to ask, understand why we've removed the cost of living adjustment for the public assistance recipients. Did anyone ask that question? If you could bring that to the working group as well.
Will do. We will bring that along with the rate adjustment question, Representative.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Senator Austin, for my indulgence today.
We don't care about dogs barking. I certainly can't care. I have 2 loud ones. So anyways, just I don't see any other questions from my colleagues. So Commissioner, we obviously have a lot of questions that we've given to you for the working group. We're going to have more questions. We'll try to send them over ahead of time as we sit down and gather those questions up. So we really appreciate you coming on. We do appreciate the work that you do. We know you're very busy. We will have some DPH questions, which we will not ask you today. We'll concentrate on DSS here. You know, you should tell the governor to hire somebody else so that we can have you concentrate on one agency. But seeing no other questions, Madam Administrator.
Yes, Madam Chair.
We have no more questions for the commissioner. The DSS is going to be leaving us. But can you go over what we have next on Monday?
On Monday, we do have some subcommittee work sessions. I know we have legislative in the morning at 10 o'clock. We start with 10 to 10:30 just for legislators and staff with a briefing from OFA. And then the work session starts at 10:30. Let me see. We also have conservation and development Monday morning starting at 9. We have of any other work sessions. I think that's it for the work sessions. But then Monday afternoon, we have the public hearing on the memorandum of understanding between the state of Connecticut and the A&R union. Those resolutions, Senate Resolution 6 and House Resolution 11, and House Bill 6555, which is one of our raised bills on the disbursement of COVID-19 relief funds. And immediately following that public hearing, we will be having a committee meeting to vote on the two resolutions and on House Bill 6555.
Thank you, Madam Administrator. I think that this is a Friday afternoon that we finished early. We have no public hearing tonight. I know a lot of you are excited about that. I know I am. So everybody have a great afternoon. Have a great weekend. Get ready for next week. Now we got to start making some hard decisions. Commissioner, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Senator. Thank you. Have a great evening.